Hello everyone. Today we're going to see a new topic in gate programming and data structures, loops. You have 1 minute to solve the question. Let's look at the answer. So another control flow is the loops. We have the for, we have the do while, and we have a while loop. Let's look at the for loop. So for loop, it is going to repeat some set of statements a certain number of times. And this repetition of this statement depends on these two. So first time I which is the loop variable will get increment, will be initialized. Once it is initialized, next we go to the check. So once the check happens, it goes to the statement. So this set of statements happens, is run. So next will be incrementing. So this process, right, incrementing, checking the condition, running the statement, it keeps going on and on till this is false. This condition is false. So this initialization happens once, only once. First time, int I is equal to 0, initialize. Then I less than 10, remember that these two, I less than 10, I plus plus, it is going to happen more than once. So I less than 10, right? It can happen once. Suppose the condition is false in the first check itself. Like suppose I was 10, right? Then it's false. So this statement may not ever happen. So this condition at least runs once. But I plus plus, right? It depends on this condition. So it may not run like the statement. This can happen zero or more times. But this will be at least once. This is always once. The initialization is always once. Condition check happens one or more times. Statement and this increment is 0 or more times. Just try to remember a simple example like in the question, right? If you see, they're asking how many times this initialization is happening, how many times the condition is happening, and the increment. Just think of some example. You do one initialization, you give some value, one false condition, and you see how many times it is running. So this happens only once. This can happen one or more times. And these two will happen 0 or more, depending on the value of this condition. So that is the for loop. For loop, what it does, it is repeating a set of statements depending on that loop variable. Next is the do while. So there is do while and the while. So while loop, right? While and this for, right? Both are depending on a condition. some statement will run. But your do while, right? Your do while is not like the other two. It's going to execute a statement even at least once. It doesn't check the condition first. So your do while loop, it first executes the statement and then only it goes to the condition. But in the while loop, first it checks the condition and then you do some statement. Let's look at some example. So do print I while I less than 10. Okay, let's give some small value just to run it. While I less than 2. So while I less than 2, print I. Okay, suppose in both these cases we're giving I as 2. Now how many times does it print? So in the case of the do while, we see that I gets printed. We get the output as 2. But in the while, right, there's this condition 2 less than 2, it becomes false. So this print never happens. So see the difference here, we got one output. Here we didn't get that statement running. So suppose you want to run a statement at least once, then always use your do while. But suppose you want to run the statement only if and only if the condition is true, then choose your while loop. So a conditional based repetition, you can use either. So both the for and the do while, right? Both of them are condition based repetition. Only if some condition is true, it repeats. While the do while, it repeats the setter statements at least once. It doesn't depend on this condition. So remember that. Okay, let's look at the question now. So what is the question? We have 4 statements. The body of a while loop is executed at least once. So we saw in the explanation, right? The statement only runs depending on this condition that we have. So just think. So if suppose the condition is the value gave us 2 and 2 less than 2, then does the while loop run? No. So body of a while loop, is it executed at least once? No, it's false. Next statement, the body of a do while loop is executed at least once. So we saw in the explanation, right? So in the case that 2 less than 2, right? This statement was running before the check. So statement was running at least once. So the body of a do while loop is executed at least once. It is true. Let's look at the next statement. The body of a do while loop is executed 0 or more, which is false. A for loop can never be used in place of while. So in the explanation, right, we saw that these two, right, they are both doing repetition based on condition. So you can either have a for or a while. Both you can interchange and use. Both are doing the exact same thing. You have some condition to check, you execute statement based on that, and then the value you can increment. So here in the for loop, right, this increment, you just need to put it in the body of the while loop. So then you will have for and while as exactly the same. So this statement is false. Let's have a quick review of everything we learned today. A for loop, there are 3 parts of the for loop. One is the initialization, one is the condition, and one is the increment. How many times does the initialization run? Only once. How many times does this condition check happens? At least once. And the body of the for loop, it depends on this condition. How many times does the increment happen? Again, it depends on the condition. Only if the condition is true, it takes place. So both the body and increment, it happens 0 or more times. So for loop what it does, you are repeating a set of statements depending on some condition. Now let's look at the while. What was while doing? Again, it was having a condition. Based on the condition, we are repeating the body. That is a set of statements a certain number of times, depending on this condition. And increment this. So you can set a loop variable also in the while. Like outside the while, you can declare int I is equal to 0, and inside the body of the while, you can increment. Now do while. So do while, suppose you want to execute the body at least once, right? So that is when you choose the do while over the while. So we repeat a set of statements and then we check the condition. Thank you.